course, the anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. To give you a little background, in the autumn of 1941, Japanese-U.S. relations grew increasingly belligerent between the two powers. Japan had occupied much of China and had refused to leave after several prompts to leave China. Furthermore, Japan is in desperate need of foreign oil and resources to fuel its war machine. It has its eyes on Australia, New Guinea, Malaya, Singapore, and Burma. Japan had also signed an alliance with Nazi Germany. Hitler was not happy with Franklin Delano Roosevelt's obvious favoring of helping the British through programs such as Lend-Lease. But Hitler's main concern in 1941 was the Big Bear, the Soviet Union. He wanted the Russians conquered before he had to take on the United States. But Japan had no such hesitations. Its leaders intended for Japan to be the supreme power in the Pacific, the greater co-prosperity sphere in East Asia, as they called it. The only country really standing in their way was the other great power in the Pacific, the United States. So while Japanese diplomats pretended to negotiate for peace, the Japanese military prepared for war. Mr. Roosevelt arrived in Warm Springs, hoping for a few days of relaxation. The previous day, his advisors had expressed no hope in negotiations with the Japanese, had even suggested arming American merchant ships in the Pacific in anticipation of the Japanese attack. The annual Thanksgiving dinner had already been postponed twice because Mr. Roosevelt could not be in attendance, but they were finally able to celebrate it on the 29th of November, though the mood was not very celebratory. Mr. Roosevelt had to cut his visit short after Japanese Premier Tojo issued a statement threatening to, quote, purge with a vengeance all U.S. and British influence in the Far East. On December 7, 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's lunch was interrupted by a telephone call from the Navy Secretary, Frank Knox. Mr. Knox informed him that the Japanese had just attacked American interests at Pearl Harbor. The following day, Mr. Roosevelt spoke to a joint session of Congress. Now, may I present Mr. Bob Prater as FDR giving Mr. Roosevelt's famous Day of Infamy speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States.
Good afternoon.
Press is here, sir.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Emperor of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. It will deceived the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. Japan, therefore, has undertaken a surprise offensive, extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. The people of the United States have already formed their opinions and well understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense. But always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. I believe that I interpret the will of the Congress and of the people when I assert that we will not only defend ourselves to the uttermost, but will make it very certain that this form of treachery will never again endanger us. Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph. So help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. I will take some questions, yes.
Does anyone have any questions for the President? Not all hands at once now.
Yes, in the back row.
How are we going to prepare, is our industrial base enough to support the weapons, or make the weapons of war that we're going to need? I know we're a bit far behind as far as preparation for war. I mean, is there already a plan for converting the industrial base?
that many of our ladies join and assist in taking over some of those roles that our men would have normally taken. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. President, what about Germany?
And what about Germany, sir?
Do you see us going to war with them?
Well, I should hope not, but we don't know where this war will lead us to. We are in the war to protect our interests, both here and abroad. And should it be necessary, we will defend to the uttermost. If that means going to war with Hitler, then we shall do that also. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. President. What about our allies? Do you see the British, the French, and the Dutch coming in to assist us, or are they too tied up with war in Europe?
Well, I feel that they probably have their hands full over there, but certainly we will accept any help that they might give us. But certainly right now, the war is ours in the Pacific. Japan has attacked us, and we must retaliate.
Any other questions, Mr. President?
Mr. President?
Yes.
One more question. The Ledger Inquirer would really like to know if it's true that the United States really had no inkling of an imminent attack from the Empire of Japan.
There, of course, as I said, have been negotiations with the Emperor, and we have done everything in our power to prevent war, and I think I shall leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.